This podcast is produced by the Harwood Productions Podcast Network. To learn more about the network and to find more of our shows, visit us online at www.harwoodpodcast.com. This episode of Sketchup, a 3D Toolbox, is brought to you by 3D Connection, makers of the Space Navigator. To learn more about them, visit their website at www.3dconnection.com. Hey there everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sketchup, a 3D Toolbox. I'm Cameron Harris, and this is episode number 32. Now, today I'm going to show you how to do roofing. So we're going to be modeling the roof that'll go on top of our small house project. Now, roofs are a little bit more tricky than other things in SketchUp because they're more complex as objects, but I've developed a technique that should make it pretty easy for you. Let me show you. So here we are back in our SketchUp model for our small house project, and I'm leaving these extra rooms here, this red room, green room, and blue room. I'm leaving those unfurnished for the time being, because furnishing those at this point would just really require downloading furniture from the 3D warehouse, and you guys already know how to do that. So if you want to go ahead and furnish those, be my guest. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and jump straight in to the roof. Now, the roof is a little bit more challenging than any other part. It requires a little bit more thought than the rest of the house because, with the rest of the house, you have walls and a floor, and everything is basically just bricks. Once you start working with roofs, however, unless you just want the top of your house to be completely flat, you do have to start working with some angles. And it starts to get pretty difficult to make sure that everything lines up correctly. I'm going to show you a method that I've come up with that's a very easy method, but still requires a little bit of thought. But we'll take it one step at a time. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to, notice we don't have anything on top of our house right now, so we need to basically draw a quick slab, kind of like the way we had a nice slab to work with that was the floor, and then we modeled everything on top of that. We're going to basically do the same thing but on the top this time. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that all of my walls and everything are grouped, and just single clicking on one of the walls, you see it selects everything. Make sure you don't have anything that's ungrouped at this point, at least nothing that's ungrouped up towards the ceiling area, because once we start drawing this slab, if something is ungrouped, it might stick to the wall, and we don't want that to happen. So make sure it's nice and grouped, everything's nice and self-contained, and now we can start modeling the top slab. Now at this point, I'm not worrying about anything except just getting a nice big shape that's covering this. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm actually going to trace along the outline of the entire house. So I'll start, I might as well start at this corner here. I'm going to switch to the line tool, and then I'm going to click once here, and you notice it brings out a line for me to work with. I'm going to click at the next corner here. I'm going to go counterclockwise, but that doesn't really matter. Right here, right when I click on this last corner right here, the entire top of this house will fill in because all of the lines are surrounding it. Click once, and now you can see we've got a face that is drawn on top of the house. Just a two-dimensional flat face, but it covers the entire house. Right? And it's also very important at this point to make sure that when you select this face, that it's not divided up. Like, I didn't want to just use the rectangle tool and just start, drawing rectangles throughout and just keep adding to it like that, because then they would be all divided up. I want this to be one nice big flat slab. So that's looking great right there. Now, the next thing I want to do is, I'll show you what we've got here. I'll just use the push-pull tool and pull this up for just a second. You can see that right now what we've got, if you can imagine this instead of being flat, it's like got all the cool gables and things like that roofs have. That's what our roof is going to look like. But before we start doing that, you'll notice there's one problem. The roof is exactly the same size and shape, at least this one is, as the lower part of the house. Now, a roof typically has more overhang than that. So for example, if we look at this wall right here, you can see that the roof doesn't stick out any more than the house does. And I want it to do that. So before I start extruding this into 3D, while it's still a very simple 2D shape, I'm going to go ahead and make it so that the roof will actually hang over all the various sides of the house about 6 inches. And to do that, I'm going to use the offset tool. And remember, just select a face and hit the F key for offset. Click once, and now we can extrude this out, or offset it out. But we're doing it like 10, 12 feet at this point. I just want to do about 6 inches, so I'll just type 6 and then enter. And now you can see we've got this outer thing right here. You can see that it's hanging over the sides of the house, about 6 inches on every side. So that's looking very nice. Now, of course, what this does is if I use the push-pull tool on this now, I only have this outer part here. Don't really want that. I still want it to be all one slab, but it's really difficult to tell right now what lines I need to erase because I've got these outer lines here that I do want to delete now, but then I've also got these interior ones from all the crown molding and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and extrude this up because I actually want to do that anyway. I want to basically extrude. I'll just start with this outer border right here. I'm just going to use the push-pull tool and pull it up 6 inches. And I'm going to do the same thing to this interior here. Very good. You can see the interior face is purple. If that happens, just right-click on it and choose Reverse Faces. Make it so the white side is facing out. And now you can clearly see these are the lines that we want to get rid of. So I'm actually going to go ahead and use the eraser tool, hit the E key for the eraser tool, and just go around and clean this up. Just swipe over the lines that you don't want and delete them. Beautiful. So now if I click on this top face here, it's all one big face. That's great. And you can also see that we've got a little bit of depth. I like that because a roof doesn't just, all of a sudden, it doesn't immediately start angling up. It actually goes straight up for about, in this case, 6 inches, and then it will start all the angling. Now, here's where things get a little bit interesting. Can you imagine, if you were to do this like the way that you would think you would do it, where you would start just, drawing lines and be like, okay, I want this line to go something like this, and then, maybe something like that, and then maybe go like that, and back up to this. You're going to end up with something that's very lopsided. It's going to take you forever, and it's just not going to be very, very neat and tidy, and it's not going to be very clean, and it's going to be a real pain to do. I'm going to show you a much simpler way that is a little bit different. It's not the way you would instinctively think to model this, but I'll show you what we're going to do. Now, this house here, I've intentionally made this house so it's going to be relatively simple to do the roof for this one. If your house has a more complex footprint than this, you might need to do your roofs in several different stages, several different parts, and then merge them together. And it's going to take trial and error. So, just bear with it and keep working with it until you find something that works. But in this case, we're going to start out nice and easy with this house, which is essentially, if you think about it, you've got 4 different sections. You've got this part here that kind of juts out here. You got this part that sticks out here, here, and then you've got this back part here. It's kind of like a strange-looking cross almost. So you really only have 4 parts you need to worry about. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and start drawing some lines on top. And I'm not going to do anything in 3D yet. I'm just going to work in 2D. And I'm going to start by drawing a simple cross. So you see I've got this part here that sticks out, right, like this. I'm going to look at it from this angle, and I'm going to find whatever the center is right here, and I'm going to draw one line like that. So I'll start out with that. I'll switch to the line tool. This is all going to make sense in just a second here. I'm going to use the line tool, and I'm going to hover over this. I'll zoom in a little bit here. Hover over this line right here, and you can see when it goes like that light blue dot, and I hover over it says midpoint, that means that I've found the exact center of this line, and that's where I want to be. So I'm going to click once there, and now I want to draw this line all the way over to the other side here. And you notice it's snapped to the red axis, so it's right at the midpoint. That looks great. I'll click once, and there we go. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do the same thing in the other direction. So I basically want the center of this guy here, right there. Click once, and I want it to go all the way to the center of this larger part that extrudes out here, which is going to be right, oops, missed it, there. You could lock it to the green axis if you want to. Just, if it's not snapping quite right for you, you can just use the arrow keys and lock it to the green axis or the red axis or whatever you want. So here we have this cross right here, all right? So we can select these line segments. I'll just shift click to select these. And you can see that's what we've got right now. Now, of course, you're probably thinking, what are you doing, Cameron? How is this going to help us build a roof? Let me show you what exactly this is going to do for us in a slightly smaller scale. You don't need to follow along for this part. I'm just going to show you something that's pretty simple. Let's say we just have the simplest roof to do possible. Let's say that this block right here is a house. All right. How could we model this? Well, we could, do the thing that you would think you would do, where you just start drawing lines and you start doing all this stuff, but that's not going to be very easy to do. Instead, if we do like we did up here, where we just draw one line down the center like this and divide that top in half like that, if we then select just this line and use the move tool and pull it up, look at what happens there. We can push and pull this however we want, and it automatically adjusts those faces to fit it. So if I go like that, for example, you can see that now we've got a very simple roof, right? So that's what we're going to do up here. Eventually we're going to select this cross and pull it up, but let me show you what happens if we do that right now. Basically, if you just think of it, we've got, like one roof that needs to go like this, one roof that needs to go like that. That's why we have these two lines. But because we have a cross, it's a little bit more complicated than that very simple example I just showed you. If I select this cross and pull it up, you see what happens. It's got some weird things going on here. It's drawing these extra lines that's kind of weird. It's just really not really working out the way I want it to. It's not doing what I want it to at all. So here's what we're going to do to fix all of this. You can see actually it's done part of the work for us. You see, when we pull it up, it tries to keep all the faces intact, and to do that sometimes it draws extra lines to keep all the faces in existence. And you can see some of the lines that it's drawing. They're going at kind of weird angles, but I'm going to show you how we're going to basically do our own version of that, where we have control and SketchUp isn't doing it automatically. So what we need to do basically is we need to basically make creases, because when you're pulling this cross up, it's essentially like folding. If you think of it like origami, for example, folding paper, you pull this up, it's causing creases in all the rest of the faces. And you can see that if I just click it like that for a second, you can see that these lines right here that we've drawn are where the creases, or at least some of the creases, are there, because that's the part that we're pulling up. What we're going to do is we're going to draw more lines that we won't pull up. We'll still just select the cross and just pull up that center cross, but we will draw some more lines. That way SketchUp doesn't have to draw any creases itself. It doesn't have to draw extra lines. We're telling it this is where we want the lines to be. It gives us more control because we know what we want. SketchUp's automatic line drawing systems doesn't know what we want. So what we're going to do, if you think about this as folding paper, what do you need to do to be able to fold on both of these lines at the same time? You need to add some creases at the corners right here, some diagonal lines. So that's what we're going to do. Right at the point where these two lines intersect right here, we're going to start drawing a line right at that center, and we're going to click once, and we could come out in either of these four directions like this. I'm going to start here because it's closest, and you can see that the closest corner is this one right here. Now if we click that, we've just made our first crease. And from there, you can kind of imagine where you're going to go next. This one is going to go to this corner here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do the other side here. We're going to click once, and the closest corner we have is this one right here. I know this seems like a really long line, but trust me, this is going to work. We'll draw another one on the other side like this. And what we've effectively done is we now have these diagonal lines. We're not going to raise those diagonal lines with the cross, but they are basically pre-existing creases that SketchUp can use. So now you can see that when we select our center cross like this, use the move tool and pull it up, look at what's happening. Those creases, those diagonal lines are moving, but no new creases are appearing like before. We've effectively pre-creased it, and you can see that as I raise this up into a roof, you can see exactly where those lines would be. And it's actually kind of interesting. I'll just stick it right there for now, and then I'll click off here to deselect. If we look at this in an aerial view and just kind of ignore the shading, you actually, from up here, it's pretty difficult to tell. Let me just undo what we just did. You see, from an aerial view, the lines don't really change, and that's what you're looking for. All you're doing is you're just adding depth, because from up there, it doesn't look very different, but from down here, pretty different. It's kind of like a pop-up book. If you've ever made a very simple pop-up book, it's very simple, very similar to that. And you can see that now we've got a very nice roof for our house. But there's a couple things we can do that'll make this a little bit more detailed, a couple more lines that we can draw before we raise that center cross. That'll make this a little bit more interesting. But before we get to that, I want to thank the people who make this show possible. 3D Connection. 3D Connection has been making what's called 3D mice for years now. And 3D mice are really very cool. Modelers love these things because they're so easy to use. They make modeling so easy because it basically takes all of the thinking out of navigating, right? So these things basically allow you to navigate through your model in SketchUp or a lot of other 3D applications actually, and it's so intuitive. It's very much like a joystick. Rather than using, mouse movements and keyboard shortcuts and all these things you got to keep in your head. Okay, if I right click and drag and it does like this, if I right click and then hit shift and then use the center mouse wheel to zoom in and out, you don't have to think about that anymore. All you do is you just reach out, you grab this thing, and you twist and turn and push and pull it in whatever direction you want to move, and it just goes there. It's so simple, and it frees up your brain as you're modeling. You're not thinking, okay, now I gotta go there. How do I get to there? You don't think about that. You just think, oh, I need to go there, and you go there. It's so simple. I want you to check these guys out. Their website is www.3dconnection.com. Take a look at the Space Navigator, because if you get one, it will change the way you model in SketchUp for the better. I want to thank them so much for sponsoring this episode of SketchUp, a 3D toolbox. So back to our roof. Now you can see that this is looking really great. I mean, you could just leave it like this if you want to, but I'm actually going to undo back to the flat view, or the flat mode that it was in. And I'm going to show you a couple more lines you can draw that'll make this a little bit more polished, a little bit more interesting. So you can see that we've got this line here, and when I select, I'm just going to select just this line, ignore the back part, but you can see that when I select just this line, it creates that kind of a triangle thing right here, right? What if you don't want it to be flat like that? What if, instead, you wanted it to be something a little bit more interesting? So what I mean by that is, right now, if I were to pull this cross up like this face here is completely flat. What if I wanted it to also angle in a little bit? You've probably seen a roof that does that. Well, that's actually pretty easy to do. If you have just like a line that goes straight to the edge like this, then it's going to be, a straight, flat triangle on the edge. But if you do something where, let's say we measure in, let's draw a quick tape measure guide, and I'll go 2 feet in, let's say. Actually, I'll tell you what, let's go crazy. Let's do 3 feet. There we go. And then starting at where my guideline and my actual real line intersect, I'm going to click there, and I'm going to draw out 2 lines to each of these 2 outer corners, okay? And then we're going to delete this last line right here. So now I'll also delete that guide just to get it out of our way. So now instead of a line that goes all the way to the edge right here, we have a line that stops here and then forks out into 2. And even though this is still flat, I think you can kind of see already where this is going. Let me show you. I'll select the cross again. Remember, don't select any of the diagonal lines. It's a good rule of thumb for now. If you're doing a more complex roof, that rule though it doesn't always hold, but for the most part, choose the straight ones, not the diagonal ones. I'll select the cross, drag it up, and you can see from here it's kind of hard to tell the difference, but if I move my angle over, you can see what it's doing. Instead of being flat, it's also angling in right now. And I really like that. That adds a nice little bit of detail. It's subtle, but it really adds a nice little something extra to the roof. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. You don't have to, but I think it'll just look better. And draw a guideline in. And you don't even have to use the guideline. You could just pick, any point here and just draw out a couple lines from that. But I like doing the guideline. That way I know it's just an even 3 feet in. Makes it a little bit simpler. So I'll delete those lines. Now I've got the same thing right there. Select the cross right there. And then just pull this up. Now, when it comes to how far you pull your roof up, well, that kind of depends. You could do just, like a couple feet like that. You could do like, really high like that and make it like a ski lodge kind of thing. I'm going to go somewhere right in between. I'm going to do, I think, 4.5 feet. So I'll do 4.5 and then apostrophe to make it feet. Enter. There we go. And you can see that looks really nice. I'm just going to do a couple extra things here. You notice how we've got this, these sides here are completely straight up and down. They're completely flat and then it angles in. So we've got these lines here are kind of like little borders. It didn't do that and it won't do that on these sides that are completely flat. But it looks a little bit strange like that. So I'm going to go ahead and add another line right there. Just kind of divide those up. That's purely cosmetic, but, it's a style choice. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side here. There we go. So now we've got our roof. That looks very nice, but of course it's white. And the final touch is to add some texture to this. And in fact, if I switch to the bucket tool, B key for the bucket tool, and I pull up my Sketchup textures picker here, you can see that in this little drop down here where it says tile and all these other things, you've also got this one category called roofing. If you choose that, then you've got all these different kinds of roof tiles. So let's try, just click on one to select it and we can paste it on here. Well, it looks okay. It's starting to look a little bit monochromatic on the outside. Let's try something with a little bit more contrast. Maybe this gray. I think I like the gray. Yeah, I think I like the gray. So I'll go ahead and paint that texture onto all the various sides of my roof. Go over here and do the same thing on this side. Very good. And missed that one. There we go. That looks really good. Now, you notice I didn't do this front part here. It's because for the parts that are completely straight, I think I'm actually going to switch back and I'm going to add these this kind of siding here. I'm going to add that to this, kind of tie it in. So I'm actually going to hit the B key for the bucket tool again, and I'm going to hold down the Command key. If you're on a Mac, if you're on a PC, it's the Control key. And I'm going to click. You notice how it switches to the eyedropper. I'm going to click on this texture here to sample it, and then I can just do a normal click right there, paste it on. And I'll do the same thing on the back here. And lastly, I'm just going to do these outer borders right here. For those, I just want to do a simple color. So I'll just switch to my color wheel here, and I'll pick just a neutral dark gray like that. And then I'll just, on all these extra white parts here, I'll just paint that in right there. Just go like that. This part is completely up to you. You could do whatever texture you want. I've actually done things where I've done something that's in the wood, the flooring section of the textures. I've actually used that for roofs in the past. It's really whatever looks good to you. And just do these last couple here. Good. And then the last touch is I'm going to do that same dark color underneath here for the part that hangs out, and just kind of click once there. And there we go. That looks great. Now, the last thing I want to do is just real quick, I'm going to actually navigate inside my house, and I'm going to look and see how my roof looks from in here. And you can see we've got a little bit of a problem, because when you extrude this thing, the roof up, sometimes, I'm not sure why it does this, and it's a little bit difficult to predict. Sometimes it won't. You notice how if we go up here, we can actually see it's not right on top. It's not resting right on top of our walls. It's got a little gap in between it. 6 inches to be exact, because that's how much we pulled it up. And sometimes it doesn't leave the original face down there. Fortunately, this is extremely easy to fix. All you've got to do is just find a line, because we have lines surrounding where this face should be. So that's not a problem. It's just the face got deleted somehow when we were pushing and pulling. So all you got to do is just find a line segment that's at that level, same level as the walls, and this line right here is a perfect line. Just retrace it. That's all you need. And when you retrace it, you notice we now have that original ceiling back. And I like the white. I think that's nice. And you can see that looks great from the inside as well. Just go back outside. And that is how you do your roofs. Well, I hope you found this episode useful. Remember that if you want to follow along with me with your roofing and you want to just use the same exact building that I'm using, you can go to our website and download the lesson file for this project, which is the Sketchup project as it was at the beginning of this episode. So you can follow along step by step with exactly what I'm doing. And that website is www.harwoodpodcast.com. And also, if you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future show ideas, send me an email at cameron@harwoodpodcast.com. I'd love to hear from you guys. Until next time, I'll just say goodbye and good modeling.